She would prance to the altar, arms flailing and hat askew, and then dance to the rear of the church, following choreography known only to her, set to music that only she could hear. And when she was spent, Eugene would drop into her seat at the end of the pew and clutch her heart while the ushers fanned her and wiped her brow. If Felix would have been disappointed in any part of his send-off, Eileen thought, it would be because Eugene couldn't get the day off to attend his service. Eileen remembered the last time she'd seen Felix alive, on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. She had been at home in Red Clay for the holiday, in her room packing to return to Montgomery, where she was a sophomore at State Teachers College. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Felix standing in the doorway. "Grandpa, I really wish Luther could have been here," she said. 2 years had passed since Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, and her brother, drafted into the Army after the U.S. declared war, couldn't get a pass to come home for the holiday. "Yes, baby, I missed him too. But I came in here to ask you a favor," he said. "You think you can get back to college by yourself? To tell the truth, I'm feeling kind of poorly." For the first time, she noticed that he seemed older. His voice was raspy and his gray hair was thinning. As a younger man, he had stood tall, muscular, with calloused hands as big as catcher's mitts. But that day he seemed smaller, stooped. The lines in his saddle-brown face were deeper. "Of course," she said. "Don't worry about it. Are you and Mama going to be all right? Mama's old, and you're well up in your 80s now. I worry about you." Felix stood straight, flexed his muscles, squared his shoulders, and said, "Girl, I'm the strongest man you know. I can handle anything that comes along better than any of them young 4F boys at college with you." Then they laughed and sat quietly in a room as the sun began to set over the brick-colored hill across the road from the house Felix had built with his own hands. "I'll be fine, baby. I'll be fine," he said, and patted her on the shoulder as the last rays of sunlight slipped from view. Outside, pine tree branches rustled in the wind, and raccoons and possums and foxes and all the other hungry creatures began the nightly hunt for food. In the distance, a rabbit shrieked as it was snatched and carried away in an owl's powerful talons, and all across planet Earth, the parade of life strutted in a never-ending cavalcade of triumph and defeat. A few weeks later, Eileen was studying in the college library when one of her Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority sisters delivered the message. "Come home. Felix H. Parker is dead." A few white people sat in the rear of the sanctuary for the funeral, mostly men for whom Felix had worked. But as Eileen scanned the crowd, she saw one white face she didn't recognize, that of an elderly woman. Very old, about 90, Eileen guessed, and tiny, barely 5 feet tall, and frail. She wore a black dress, and her thin, wispy white hair was pulled back into a bun topped by an old-fashioned black silk bonnet. Eileen was sure the woman weighed no more than 80 pounds. "Do you know who that old white woman is?" she whispered to her brother, Luther, leaning across her mother, Maybelle, who sat between them. Luther, home on leave from the Army for the funeral, looked over his shoulder and turned back to Eileen. He shook his head and mouthed the word, "No." When the service ended and the pallbearers moved forward to carry the casket to the waiting hearse, Eileen noticed that the woman had disappeared. A phantom vanished without a trace. The next morning, Eileen woke early. Luther and their mother were still asleep in their rooms, exhausted by the strain of greeting mourners who had visited to express condolences and to consume mountains of fried chicken, potato salad, collard greens, cornbread, and yeast rolls, cakes and pies prepared by the ladies of the church and delivered to the house on Jefferson Street. They had meant well and were appreciated, but Eileen and her family had been relieved when they all left. Among the last to depart was Edna Mae Daniels, a stylish elderly woman whose smart outfits rarely failed to make her a standout at church on Sunday mornings. "She ought to be ashamed, old woman like her trying to dress like a young girl."